Hi, Trendsetters. Welcome back to another That Trendy Therapist episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the intro episode, if you guys are here from that. And thank you guys for joining in today. I'm so happy that you're here. Yeah, I'm also wearing a really comfy sweatshirt that I got from the Mayfair group. It's obviously says empathy, and I have the matching sweats also. But I'm wearing yoga clothes right now. Actually, this set right here, if you guys can see, and I love the color of it for fall. It's from Girlfriend. I think it's just called Girlfriend Collective. I'll link it below. And this is from the Mayfair group. So now that we got into what I'm wearing, let's get into the topic of today's video. So I thought what would be a great first episode here on YouTube would be for me to talk to you guys about why it's important to do the work. Like, why are we talking about mental health? Why should we go to therapy if we're not in therapy already? What's the point? And, the reason that I want to talk about this is because I feel like you're either the type of person that you're already in therapy and you understand why it's so beneficial, or maybe you've considered it in the past, but you're worried about what might come up or what that deep work would look like for you, so you've just avoided it. Or maybe you don't fully understand what therapy is. Maybe you are of the mentality of people will need therapy if you have some sort of huge life crisis going on, or if you have a mental illness, or if something imperative has happened that you need to talk about, all of which can be true. You can go to therapy for all of those things, but you definitely don't have to. And I think that's one of those huge misconceptions that a lot of boomers in that generation had. And for millennials, those are our parents. So I think that's been passed down. Obviously, Gen Z is now very woke and progressive and understands the importance of therapy, which is awesome. But I think that, there are still people that question it and don't fully understand why it's important to do that work. So from somebody that's been in therapy for years and is a therapist, I want to talk to you guys about why it's important and why anyone and everyone can benefit from therapy. So let's do this in terms of some myths. It's a myth that you have to have some sort of life crisis to go to therapy, or that you have to have a mental illness to go to therapy. Both are myths. You can go to therapy if you are just wanting to do the work on yourself. You can go to therapy if you have a little bit of mild anxiety. You can go to therapy if you're having some problems at work, if you're having problems with friends, family. If everything in your life seems to be going great, you can still go to therapy. It's not reserved for any section of the population based on gender, background, ethnicity, presenting problem, levels of functioning. There's no, there are different types of therapists and different specialties, but there's no rules to it. And that's the first myth that we should bust, because it's just not true. And sometimes I'll even get people who I'll have a phone consult with, and they'll say, well, I don't know if I'm eligible for therapy, or I don't know if I'm a good candidate for therapy, because my life does look pretty good from the outside, and it's not like I'm struggling to get out of bed every day, or I'm ridden with anxiety. And I always say, well, so that's not a requirement. None of those things are requirements to go to therapy and to want to do that work on yourself. So that's the first thing. Another thing is that therapy takes a lot of guts. It's hard work. It's really good work, but it's hard work. And so I think a lot of people kind of know that about therapy. People realize that if you're going to go to therapy, you're not really going to be able to kind of escape from anything, that you're going to be called to talk about yourself and your life and to do that work, and that you're going to have to talk about things that are uncomfortable, that you may be avoiding, or that you maybe not even thought of or uncovered yet, which of course is scary. I mean, this is deep work, and it is very scary, but it's completely necessary work to do. I think what people don't understand about therapy is that it's not going to only benefit you when you go to therapy. And I say this because I think some people don't go to therapy because they think that I'm not the problem. Other people in my family or friend group, they're the problem, but like, I'm not, so why should I go to therapy? But in any sort of system, and this is called system-centered therapy, what I'm talking about right now, but in system-centered therapy, the form of therapy, every group of people, whether it's a family unit, a friend unit, school, it's all a system. And in any system, there's a dynamic there. And it takes multiple people to form a dynamic. So it's never just one person, right? Like, it's not, oh, let's all look at Mary, she's the problem. In fact, that's part of a dysfunctional family unit or friend unit if you think that one person is the problem, because it's never just one person. And in fact, it's called the identified patient. If somebody is, or a scapegoat, if somebody is that person that's getting all the blame in a system, because there's got to be other people there that are looking the other way towards their own dysfunctionality. So you can't excuse yourself. You can't say, well, therapy can work for everybody else, but not for me. I'm immune. I don't need it. Everyone can benefit from it. That's just the truth, because it's just work on the self. It's not work designed to manipulate you or to tell you a specific thing or control your life, which I say these things, they seem obvious to me as a therapist, but I think a lot of people worry, like, if I go to therapy, are they going to tell me to change my life course, or, make me talk about things I don't want to and make me do things I don't want to do? The therapist isn't there to tell you what to do. In fact, we're not supposed to tell you what to do. So it's not about that at all. The therapist's job is to hold space for you to do that difficult work and that digging, and to help guide you to figure out what it is that you need to work on, and to get you to a place where you feel like your life is fulfilling and healthy and successful and happy. That's what our job is. So we don't have some ulterior motive. We're not trying to control you or guide you to a specific endpoint that we know about that you don't know. None of that is true. It's a collaborative process. And if anything, a good therapist will start with the patient and start where the patient is. That's what I like to do when somebody comes to see me. It's not a one size fits all. Obviously, I'm trained in specific areas like CBT and DBT and psychodynamic therapies, but I'm not going to use the same approach for every single person, because that wouldn't make any sense. I start where the patient is. I figure out what is it that person wants, what's their style. Are they more hands-on and they want goal setting like CBT or DBT, or maybe they're more interested in working on childhood dynamics and maybe talk therapy would be better, like psychodynamic therapy. So it's definitely a personalized approach, and there's all different forms of therapy, and, shorter term therapy, longer term therapy, which is another point that I would want to touch on. I think that a lot of people that haven't been to therapy don't realize that there's no specific time period for therapy. You don't go into it and know what the end date's going to be unless you're doing like a therapy group for 6 weeks or something like that. But generally speaking, it's a process, and the therapist and you together will decide at which point it seems appropriate to terminate services. Another thing about therapy that I think people don't realize, in the same vein as it's not that you're just going to therapy because you're trying to go to therapy for somebody else in your life, right? But that therapy will help you not just to do your internal work and be your best self, but to be your best self in every context. Meaning that if you're not doing that personal work, you are having an effect on your relationships. Because the thing is, all relationships are affected by individuals that don't do their work. Whatever baggage or or things you're bringing, trauma, whatever you haven't worked through before your relationships, whether it's romantic relationship, friendships, family, anything, you're bringing that in. So you might think, well, I'm fine. I don't need to do the work, but you could be causing damage to somebody else in your life by not doing the work. So you can think of it like that. I want to talk to you guys about this book. It's called The Road Back to You, and I just started reading it, and it's by Ian Morgan Cron and Suzanne Stabile. It's an Enneagram journey to self-discovery. So I will be making a lot of episodes on the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a personality typing system, and it's got its roots back into ancient times, and now it's being more modernized with books like this, and it's honestly amazing. If you have not tapped into the Enneagram in any way, I would highly recommend that you do so. It's just one of those tools to really get you in touch with who you are, what your personality is, and working with those strengths and weaknesses and trying to make yourself, the best person you can be. But as I was reading it, in the intro, it was talking about some of these reasons why doing the work is so important. So in this book, it's asked, what does getting out of your own way entail? And it says it has to do with self-knowledge. Most folks assume they understand who they are when they don't. They don't question the lens through which they see the world, where it came from, how it shaped their lives, or even if the vision of reality it gives them is distorted or true. Even more troubling, most people aren't aware of how things that helped them survive as kids are now holding them back as adults. They're asleep. So I wanted to read that passage because it really illustrates a few things. It illustrates the importance of doing the work on yourself, because you might not even realize some of these things that you've been holding on to, some of the patterns from childhood or the beliefs that you've held since childhood that perhaps were true at one point or maybe served you well at one point, but maybe they're not serving you now. I mean, I'm sure you're not exactly the same person as you were when you were a child, and your situation isn't exactly the same thing as it was when you were a child. So you need different coping strategies to face the world now as who you are as an adult or teen or however old you are. So I love that the quote illustrates that. And it also speaks to the point that you might not be aware of the fact that you need to do the work, that you might feel fine and feel like, oh, well, I can function day to day. And yeah, maybe you can function day to day, but maybe internally you're not as healthy as you can be. And you wouldn't necessarily know that if you're spending your time and your days kind of running from that truth. So that's important to consider. So it goes on to say, what we don't know about ourselves can and will hurt us, not to mention others. As long as we stay in the dark about how we see the world and the wounds and beliefs that have shaped who we are, we're prisoners of our history. We'll continue going through life on autopilot, doing things that hurt and confuse ourselves and everyone around us. Eventually, we become so accustomed to making the same mistakes over and over in our lives that they lull us to sleep. We need to wake up. We need to wake up. A lot of the people that haven't done the work on themselves are asleep. In fact, I think all of them are. Because if you haven't dug deep and figured out who you are at your core, what makes you tick, what motivates you, what your limiting beliefs are, then you really don't know much. You can't get far in life at all if you don't know who you are, because you'll still have your limiting beliefs. You will be out of touch with your true nature, your true desires, your passions, if you aren't connected to that inner self. And it takes work. I mean, it takes work for everybody. Even the most self-aware people are in therapy because they realize the importance of that work. And so it's a tool. It's something that will actually help move you forward in life. So if you're somebody that is goal-oriented or that dreams of success in any way, then what you should realize is you can't really have true success if you haven't done the work on yourself. And maybe that's a harsh truth and something to really consider. But I do feel like a lot of the time our society is running on empty, especially the whole influencer culture of New York City, the whole fast-paced sort of like bustling around culture where we're hustling and we're trying to get to the top. We're all running around trying to impress others with what we think is going to impress them. But what we don't realize is that we're failing ourselves when we do that. When we're neglecting who we are, neglecting to do that inner self-care work, we're failing ourselves. We're going to sleep to our own voice, our own desires. Maybe we don't even want to be doing some of the things we're doing, but we wouldn't know that if we're not in tune with ourselves, right? Like if you're disconnected from that authentic self, then you wouldn't really know if the choices that you're making or the friendships that you have in your life are true, are real, are ones that you should be in. Because you're not your best healthy self. So how could you be in the best healthy relationships that you could be in? So what I'm trying to say with all this is that it's not just about you. It's about your entire life. It's not just, oh, I need to go to therapy to learn one answer about this one problem that I have. It's more broad sweeping than that. It's going to have impacts in your life in so many ways, positively. You will be able to think clearer. You will understand what triggers you have, what to avoid, what you want to move towards, what your true desires are, what your voice says, what your opinions are. I mean, there are so many benefits to doing this work. And no one said it was easy. No one said it was supposed to be easy or, fun. It's not always fun, but a lot of times it is actually. It's really fun to do the work on yourself and to uncover these things about yourself. And you never know what you're going to find. You never know how many positive things can happen once you start to do that work and prioritize yourself. So as we sort of talk about mental health more and realize that the stigma that we once had around mental health is ridiculous, that should have never been there in the first place, I think we need to really understand therapy and why it's important, why it's essential. Why, if you're not going to therapy, why you should. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're failing in life. It doesn't mean anything other than you're winning because you chose to do the hardest work that you could do on yourself and that you're investing in yourself in a way that will get you ahead ultimately later on in life. And you are at a disadvantage if you don't do the work. I mean, it's so easy to spot somebody that's out of line with themselves, who is disconnected from their truth, who's running around like a chicken with their head cut off, that is running on empty, that is doing the same things or picking the same dysfunctional relationships or making the same toxic choices that they've always made because they haven't realized how to get around that. There are so many implications. So if you're at all considering going to therapy, run, don't walk. The sooner, the better. The sooner that you pick up the phone, the sooner that you're making a choice that's actually really, really going to benefit you in your life. I also want to say that it's never too late. I feel like some people might think, well, if I was going to go to therapy, I should have gone to therapy already. I have too many problems. I have too much to tap into. It's going to be too difficult or impossible to even start doing the work now. And if that's you, I would just say, that's a choice, right? Like, you're avoiding doing that work. And ask yourself why. Ask yourself, what are you afraid of? Can you be really specific about it? Because sometimes when we break problems down like that, we really start to consider from different angles, and it becomes clear that maybe it's our limiting beliefs that are holding us back and that there's not something that's actually imminently scaring us. So I would ask yourself that, but I would also say that it's never too late. There's never too many problems that a therapist can't handle. A good therapist will start wherever you want to start and will help you with whatever you want help with. And yes, maybe you'll have to talk about things that are undesirable, but it's all with the purpose of benefiting you and living your best, healthiest life. And that's what it is. And so you can make that choice no matter if you're 60, 70, 80 years old, 90 years old. good for you if you're that age and you decide to do that work. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing. It's never going to hurt. It will only help. That's how you have to look at it. So that said, I hope you guys got something from this episode. And if you have other questions, comments, anything of the sort, please comment them down below. Like, subscribe, do all those fun things. And I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.